1. Roland. Light peeked through Roland's drawn curtains, blinding him temporarily. He glanced at the clock at the bottom right of his center monitor, seeing it was already 8 o'clock. When was the last time he'd eaten? The bowl of half-empty cereal 4 feet away had turned to mush, telling him it had been hours. He spooned the remnants of warm milk and oats into his mouth and continued, scanning through the files. "Come on, Raleigh. You're so close. Keep going," he told himself, blinking his sore eyes. The living room had become a makeshift office. Screens were mounted along the wall behind the desk, intercepting news feeds around the world. Roland shifted in his chair, scanning between the monitors. The volume was off, but the graphic images clearly depicted riots in Botswana as toxic fog thickened, rolling across South Africa from the Indian Ocean. People were dying by the thousands, and only half of that number stemmed from the terrible disaster. The next screen showed hail falling in Iran. Snow blanketed half of Egypt, and people were screaming that the end of the world was nigh. Roland watched the third monitor as a light coating of ash fell over Paris, a precursor of what was to come from looming eruptions in Iceland's active volcanic network. Roland had guessed this was coming. Since he was a teenager, he'd followed the erratic weather patterns, and all of it led to this day, this doomsday, as the media was so apt to name it. A convergence of numerous, horrifying events could only mean one thing, and Roland thought of the phrase, "the cataclysm of Earth." "And what do you have to say?" Roland asked the man in a cheap suit and a trench coat on the news feed, standing outside Yellowstone National Park, fear stamped on his face. He flicked the volume on and observed with interest. "When the Yellowstone supervolcano is affected by the tremors, it will erupt, along with a series of volcanoes along the Pacific Rim. Tsunamis will wipe out Hawaii, along with the entire western coast of the United States. Japan has already begun their evacuation." Roland turned it off and focused on his work. An email popped up from his source, this one through untraceable channels, and he wondered if they'd finally found the information he'd been searching for. No. It was a video feed from right near his own home. The feed was live, and he watched as the streets filled with people. Looting had begun. Police lights flashed as they marched down San Pedro Drive in riot gear, fending off attacks. Roland stood, heading to the window, and spread the blinds apart with his fingers. The sun was almost below the horizon, and he caught a glimpse of it off the water. Here in Newport Beach, things still seemed civilized and normal, at least from the view of his waterfront house. He wondered what his grandmother would have thought about all of this. She'd been so headstrong. She would have stayed here until the tidal waves tore her home from the ground and dragged her out to sea. Roland wasn't going to follow her lead. He glanced to the side of the room where a bag sat packed. He had a plan, but he needed something first. One more email, one last detail, and he'd be able to make his move. Roland went to the kitchen, bringing his empty bowl, and searched for something edible. Dishes were piled in the sink, and he really wished he'd hired a maid, but he couldn't trust anyone inside his house. Not with all the classified information stored in the computer system. Nope. This place was sealed tighter than the Pentagon. He brewed a pot of coffee, hoping the caffeine would spruce him up, because his head was beginning to swim. The countless shipping manifests and spreadsheets he'd been combing through were affecting his vision. With a steaming cup, he made his way to his desk, turning off all of the news feeds so he could focus. He clicked a document closed and spotted a folder on the desktop. He clicked the letters TSP for Top Secret Project and retrieved the file he wanted. Inside were details on the billionaire Lewis Hound and a scattering of blurry pictures of the man. He was rarer than a unicorn and photographed about as well as the Sasquatch.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it. at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.